14 The men in black. Ulrich landed on the ground, exhausted. He was nauseous, and all his muscles hurt as if he were beaten up. All around him, everything was dark and blurry. "Ulrich," cried Yumi. "I sense you far away." "It's because you have the helmet on," his friend insisted. "We're back on Earth. Take it off." Ulrich obeyed, and little by little, managed to sense his hands again and the helmet that sat heavily on his head. With some trouble, he removed the strap and finally took off the device. Yumi was sitting on the ground beside him in the apartment. She was having trouble breathing. "Are you okay?" asked the schoolboy. "Bad. It's like the lasers hit me pretty hard," she responded. "Same for me." Ulrich stood up and started to stretch to loosen his muscles. "What do we do?" he asked. "Do you think we should go back into this thing?" "To hunt down Hopper's ghost," replied Yumi. "I doubt that'd be a good idea," but then, Ulrich started to say. "SHH," his friend suddenly interrupted him. "Listen." The young boy hushed up and focused on a strange noise. Coming from out the window, apart from the endless Sunday traffic, a rhythmic sound could be heard, like pow, pow, pow. It was the propellers of a helicopter. Ulrich pointed to the window silently, but Yumi shook her head. The noise she heard was coming from the door. From the stairs. Steps. Someone must have perceived the reactivation of the replica and came to take control of the building. The two friends opened the door wide and snuck out into the dark hall. There, they heard a masculine voice say, "Boss, they're over here." Men were climbing the staircase. Ulrich got ready to slide down the railing to throw himself on the assailants, but Yumi signaled to him not to move. They huddled close to the railing so as not to be seen and held their breaths. Two large men with short hair wearing sunglasses and long black overcoats were rapidly scaling the steps and passed in front of them. The students dashed to the stairs. The first man nearly grabbed Yumi's arm and tried to catch her, in vain. He cried, "Stop you two. You don't know what kind of a mess, get on the ground." "You are under RTHT, added the second man with a lisp. The two friends didn't listen to them and threw themselves onto the stairs. But only a simple slip up and they'd end up on the ground, and be taken. "We are armed, Guy TH. "Don't aggravate the situation, yelled the man with the lisp. The other hollered on his walkie-talkie, "This is Weasel and Ferret to Lone Wolf. They're coming. They are on the 4th floor. There's a third man." Ulrich murmured to Yumi. They were on the 1st floor when they crossed paths with Lone Wolf. He was also dressed all in black and was holding an enormous pistol in his hand. He aimed it at them and spoke, "Well, kids, the race ends here." But Ulrich and Yumi didn't listen to him either and ran down the hall to dive behind the final door. They were in an apartment identical to the one they just left, except that this one was empty. There was just carpet and some horrible wallpaper, plus some old, abandoned chairs in a corner. Ulrich closed the door, blocking it off with a chair by placing it under the doorknob. "What do you want to do now?" asked Yumi. "We're completely trapped." Ulrich pointed to the window. "When we entered the building, I noticed that there was a ledge and gutters on the facade. We could maybe..." "What? You're crazy," she protested. "We're not in a movie." "Do you have a better idea?" he said, irritated. "Because the door isn't going to last for long." He hurried to the window and leaned it on the ledge. "Come on," he said to Yumi. "We're going to make it." It indeed wasn't like in the movies, where the ledges were always large enough to cross with ease. This one was barely 10 centimeters wide, just enough for the tips of their toes. And the closest gutter was 2 meters away. The two friends kept an eye on the street and the trees and footpaths below, and saw a big, black sedan, doors open, parked crookedly just in front of the door to the building. A little further away, a young pizza man had parked his orange and green scooter, and was taking a pizza out from the luggage rack. Suddenly, the door gave way and Lone Wolf rushed into the apartment. Not the time to hesitate, Ulrich and Yumi ventured onto the ledge, with their bodies against the wall, faces pressed against the rough rock surface, and toes contracted to get a better footing. Ulrich leaned out as much as possible and managed to reach the metal gutter. He grabbed it desperately and stretched out his hand to help Yumi. Unfortunately, in the meantime, Weasel and Ferret came out from the building and got back into their car. They watched them from below. "Make th here, you don't hurt your elf th, kid th," the man with the lisp spoke. "You're done running away here." "You're dreaming," muttered Ulrich. Slowly, the two friends slipped across the length of the gutter, but when they made it 2 meters from the ground, the men in black approached them, laughing. "Yumi, we have to jump," whispered Ulrich. "And then what? What do you think we do then?" He looked nervously below, looking for an idea that he managed to find without taking too much time. "The pizza man's scooter. We're going to take it." "Are you crazy?" exclaimed Yumi. "We don't have a choice," he responded. "On 3, we jump. 1, 2, 3. They launched themselves from the building and landed roughly on Weasel and Ferret. "Ow," the 2 men cried. "Come on, Yumi," cried Ulrich, rushing towards the scooter. "Quick, jump on behind me." He started up the engine and left like a rocket, while Lone Wolf dashed into the building. Without waiting, the man jumped into the sedan with his 2 partners. Not only were Ulrich and Yumi not wearing helmets, but they had stolen a scooter. That's not to forget that they had broke open a door to an apartment and were now being chased down by a big car with 3 armed men on board. "What a day," snickered Ulrich while slipping between cars. After Rue Lemonnier, they went through a roundabout which took them to Molière Avenue. But they leaned so much while turning that the kickstand of the scooter rubbed against the bitumen and produced a cloud of sparks. "Try not to get us killed," cried Yumi, hanging onto her friend. "Look behind us and tell me if they're gaining on us." The sedan was indeed approaching closer and closer, especially whenever the scooter went down a long avenue without traffic. "I get it," exclaimed Ulrich. "We'll stay on the back roads." They turned onto the first small street on the right, then veered right away onto another on the left. In order to lose their assailants, the young boy went down a closed street and barely avoided an old van that beeped its horn at them to express its discontent. "Here, they can no longer follow us," Ulrich cried out in a triumphant tone. "Actually, they can," replied his friend. "Look up." Yumi pointed to the helicopter that, just like a big, black, buzzing fly hadn't lost sight of them once since they left Rue Lemonnier. "I forgot they also had a helicopter," sighed Ulrich. "All right, let's go back to the park where we were this morning. We'll lose them there." He took another 2 turns again at full speed, then sped into Long Diane Avenue that surrounded the park. But the black sedan suddenly emerged from around a corner, risking to overthrow the situation. The car headed straight towards them. Ulrich drove onto the footpath and began beeping like crazy to warn the pedestrians to get out of the way. "Over there, there's an entrance," hollered Yumi, pointing towards an entryway in the park's metal gate. "Watch out for that guy," cried Yumi, panicking. "And the lady with the stroller." The helicopter was still above them and the sedan was catching up. The scene looked like one out of an action film, except that this situation was real. "We need something to slow them down," Ulrich stated aloud. "Like what?" replied his friend. "We've only got pizzas on us." "Well, that's fine. What do you mean?" Ulrich dodged a kid playing ball, giving him a smile so as not to scare him, then accelerated onto the gravel path. "Throw them at them." Yumi moved to the seat of the scooter, managed to open the box full of pizzas, then released the first round of munitions. "That one's a capricciosa pizza judging by the scent," said Ulrich. "That makes me hungry." "You think this is the time for that?" responded his friend. "Okay, I'm ready." Ulrich slowed down to let the sedan approach. Ferret opened the passenger window, stuck his head out and clutched his gun. But when the car was only several meters away, Yumi threw the first pizza, which hit the man square in the face. His sunglasses slid while the mozzarella and tomato sauce dripped from his hair and clothes. "Damn kids," yelled the man. "Bombs 2 and 3, 4 cheeses and margarita," exclaimed Yumi, while throwing pizzas onto the windscreen. The sedan swerved and turned on its windscreen wipers, but too late. The driver didn't see the empty bank on the right and the car headed straight into it, then became stuck. The shock made smoke come out from the radiator. The 3 men in black crawled out from the car one after the other. "You have deadly aim," sung Ulrich in admiration. "All right, now let's get out of here," responded Yumi with a smile. Under the close surveillance of the black helicopter, Yumi and Ulrich left the scooter near the Albert metro station. They hid the keys under the seat and added €50 there as well, which was all they had left. Ulrich would have just as well skipped over the reimbursement, but Yumi threw him a look and said, "Let's at least do something good today." They rushed into the halls of the metro and caught their breath. "We did it," sighed Ulrich. "At least here the helicopter can't follow us anymore, and the metro system is way too large. I challenge them to guess where we're going. Also, Yumi added, I noted the telephone number of the pizzeria of the scooter we took. As soon as we get to the train station, I'll call them to tell them to go pick it up. Ulrich agreed and observed his friend. She had rosy cheeks, hair all messed up from the wind, and a tired smile, but in his eyes, she had never been so beautiful before. It was his way to tell, we are more than just friends. Wasn't this the best time, now, to make it clear where they stand? Yumi, he stammered, I don't know if you remember. It was several days ago at Kadic. When I wanted to talk to you and we were interrupted by Sissy, I remember very well, she replied, placing a finger gently on his mouth. But we should get going. We can talk about it another time, don't you think? We have all the time in the world ahead of us. She approached him and gave him a small kiss on the cheek. Her mouth was soft and her beautiful perfume floated in the air, all that was needed to make his head spin. It was true, they had all the time in the world. He took her by the hand, and together they passed through the metro. They needed to return to Kadic as quickly as possible to tell Jeremy and the others what they had discovered. It was 8 hours in the morning at Washington, but a lot activity still continued to go on in the bureau. For those working in certain domains, there really was no weekend off. Like every day, Dido showed up at 7 on the dot. She drank some coffee while leafing through the news and seeing what happened the night before. It was amazing how the journalists managed to write everything without ever succeeding in making the reader understand what really happened. The woman turned on her computer and started to study several reports when the phone rang. A call from Belgium, announced Maggie, her secretary. Send it through to me. With these words, Dido grew an ugly grin. It was an unexpected call, and for her, unexpected calls were never good news. There was a click while Maggie transferred the line. Then, "This is Lone Wolf," said a masculine voice. "Dido?" "Yes, it's me." The man was calling her on a public line. She could hear children crying and people angry in the background. Someone said, "It clear that th mall th pi th y th o th age at h of the btht quality." Then a woman cried, "You're nothing but delinquents and thugs. I'm going to call the police." Dido began to grow impatient and tapped her jeweler-covered fingers on the desk. "Lone Wolf," she said, "I hope that you realize that this call is in violation of all the security norms." "Certainly, Dido. Madam. But this is an emergency. The kids found the apartment on Rue Lemonnier. That's the bad news, that could ruin the entire day." "Did they find the replica?" asked the woman. "Yes, madam, and they even activated it. We showed up 10 minutes after the signal was triggered. We unfortunately weren't prepared for a red alert here in Brussels." "Bunch of useless," Dido exclaimed, outside of her normal self. "I even organized for you to have a team ready. And you were supposed to be." "Well," replied Lone Wolf stupidly, "but maybe they weren't able to enter the replica either. Like what happened to us. They're kids," the woman hollered into the phone. "We don't know what would happen were people of that age to try it. Give me a detailed account of what happened immediately." "Well," Lone Wolf continued, "we received the alert and we rushed to the scene. Agent Weasel, Ferret, and me. And Agents Martin and Fox were also on board a helicopter. But the kids managed to get away from us." "They were armed, madam, armed?" Dido asked, surprised. "Well, yeah, exhaled a voice behind Lone Wolf. "Explain to her how the pizza were XTHL weapon th." "That's enough," roared the woman. "I don't want to hear anything more of it. Where are the kids?" "The helicopter wasn't able to follow them once they reached the metro," Lone Wolf continued. "But this isn't a problem. They are surely headed towards the train station to return home. We can follow them up to Kadic and then intercept them." Dido sighed. She couldn't stand working with idiots. "Forget it," she ordered, mortified. "You've done enough damage for today. Just avoid having the people around you call the police. That's all we need, for our government to excuse itself to the local forces. And then, return to the apartment on Rue Lemonnier. I want 3 men to watch it day and night until the next order. And forget the kids. I will contact our agent at Kadic. They will resolve the situation." "The agent at Kadic," said Lone Wolf, surprised. "But madam, he has no longer been in service since." "An agent may never retire and never goes out of service, Lone Wolf. When you work with us, you don't leave so easily. Remember that, you." Dido hung up the telephone with a slam. She smiled, then returned to the receiver. "Maggie," she said, more calm. "Yes," the secretary responded. "Find me the phone number of the agent for the city of the Iron Tower, in France. We have an emergency." 15 Eva Skinner's kiss. Jeremy had insisted, with the man with 2 dogs wandering around the hermitage and their parents' homes, they were best to remain hidden for as long as possible. And the best way to be discreet was to stay out in the open. So, instead of the hermitage or a bedroom at Kadic, everyone was told to meet at around 5 o'clock at the Café au Lait. Therefore everyone, Jeremy, Elida, Richard, Ulrich and Yumi, just returned from their trip to Brussels, were present, everyone except Odd and Eva. "Has anyone seen them?" Ulrich asked. Jeremy shrugged. "They saw each other this morning, but I don't know anything other than that. You know Odd, he must be in the middle of making goo-goo eyes at her." "Did you try to call him?" "Yes, but he didn't respond." Elida shook her head, incredulous. Ulrich and Yumi let out their exasperation, which they had been holding in until now. "But aren't you interested to know what happened? We found a replica. And in it we saw the ghost of," one said. "And the men in black," the other added. "And the pizza." Calm down, calm down." Jeremy cut them off. "That's the reason why we're here, to listen to you, but say everything in the right order. Did you manage to construct the electronic lockpick?" Both speaking at the same time, the 2 students recounted what happened in Belgium, up until the incredible car chase through the streets of Brussels. Jeremy brought them up to date with what happened during their absence, the mysterious man at Yumi's house and everything else. At the end of the story, the girl held her face in her hands, while Richard looked at his palm computer, seemingly embarrassed. Jeremy paced, hands behind his back. "We're there," he finally murmured. "We're on the verge of discovering something huge on Hopper and the supercomputer." "What do you mean by that?" Ulrich asked. "If you both seemed to see Hopper in the replica you found," "Not seemed," Ulrich protested. "He was really there. So, that means that the replica was constructed by Hopper himself. And that the professor inserted a copy of himself in it to give us clues." "You mean give clues to the men in black?" Yumi corrected. "Who knows how many times they've been able to easily observe this mysterious city, and speak with him." "Yes," Jeremy continued. "And I'd like to know what Miss Hertz has to do with all of this. But I think that all the mysteries are starting to have a link to one another. Firstly, there were the codes in Richard's palm computer, then the codes in Hertz's dossier, and finally this replica. It's as if Hopper left a series of traces that we have to follow. Maybe they're clues for finding my mother," Elida breathed. "Maybe," Jeremy said. "It's highly likely that Hopper wanted us to solve this enigma that's close to his heart, in other words Anthea's disappearance. But the problem is that the file with the code has disappeared, and I don't know who took it or why." "What if it was Professor Hertz who took it?" Richard asked. "She never goes into students' rooms," Jeremy announced. "No, it was someone else." Ulrich intervened. "You're forgetting one detail, because in the chase for the man, we're not alone. We have to confront 2 enemies that we barely even know. On one side, there are the men in black, who are armed and have a helicopter and cars, and maybe even more. And on the other, there's the man with 2 dogs, who's wandering around the city and who wants to kidnap our parents. Could this man be part of the men in black?" Yumi suggested. "Impossible," Jeremy replied. "They work differently. The man with 2 dogs acts alone, he uses technology straight out of science fiction, and he doesn't care about laws or any of that sort of stuff. The men in black on the other hand seem like government agents or something of the sort. Do you have any idea of the number of authorizations required to fly a helicopter above a city? The police know them and leave them alone, that's for sure. So, Ulrich is right, as well as us, there are 2 other groups investigating the Franz Hopper case." Then Jeremy sat back down, exhausted. "Guys," he sighed, "we need to move forward by reflecting on each step, or we won't get anywhere. The problem is very, very delicate, and if you ask me, first of all you need to go find Odd. Yesterday, he told me that he wanted to see Eva, but didn't elaborate. Before deciding what we're going to do, let's try to assemble as many elements as possible in this puzzle, and above all, stick together." "You said you need and not we need to go find Odd," Richard asked Jeremy. "You aren't coming?" "No, if it doesn't bother you, I'd like to borrow your palm computer." That way, I can start to study the code. In my room, I have a series of notes on this whole thing and I can reflect on it alone, and in silence. So, you go find Odd, and we'll all meet up tomorrow after school. What do you say? Proposition accepted, boss. Ulrich nodded. Well, let's go find that slacker Odd. Jeremy watched his friends leave the cafe, then he paid for the food and exited into the January cold. In reality, he had no intention of shutting himself in his room, at least, not right away. He walked aimlessly around the city streets, and then he found himself in front of the Hermitage. There, he understood what the place he really wanted to go to was. He passed the villa gate, then went through a hole in the fence at the bottom of the garden to arrive directly in Kadic's park. The morning's torrential rain had melted the snow, making the undergrowth muddy. He headed towards the manhole hidden in the ground. He slid the cover to the side, then began to descend into the sewers. He walked the same path he'd taken many times before, and then climbed back up to the iron bridge to the old abandoned factory. He took the elevator to reach the 3 underground levels, right down to the supercomputer room, at the heart of the factory. The atmosphere was somber and quiet. Near the door, on the ground, there was a manhole through which he had gone and discovered this secret and mysterious place. He again remembered the enigma that he had to solve to open the cover. Delenda was the question, and the response had been Carthago. The wordplay came from a Latin phrase meaning, Carthage must be destroyed. And it was a long time after, during the video found in the secret room in the Hermitage, that Hopper had explained what his Carthage really was, the monster it contained and why it had to be destroyed. Jeremy approached the enormous and unique cylinder that sat in the room. This metallic column reached the ceiling. It was cold and perfectly smooth, apart from its lever switch that came out of the base. If he'd pulled the lever, the room would have been immediately bathed in light, and on the cylinder, the 1,000-colored lights of circuits would glisten as they began to work again. The old factory would come back to life, the scanners on the 2nd underground floor would reactivate and the command terminal would light up once again. The return of Lyoko, and only Lyoko? Or also Xana, the creature they were convinced they'd annihilated for good? Mechanically, Jeremy posed his hand on the lever. His fingers then wrapped around it to lower the switch and once again activate the supercomputer. Suddenly, he stepped back, startled. Was there someone there with him? His breathing became more rapid. No, he was probably just scared of himself. Jeremy was alone in the factory, nobody could have followed him. X.A.N.A, he whispered. No response. Odd was bound and gagged in the living room of the girl he had thought would be his future girlfriend. Eva had succeeded in rendering him defenseless with impressive agility. Before he could say a word, he found himself on the ground, his ankles and wrists bound by a thick rope that rubbed against his skin. And the poor boy had to avoid arching his back, or the rope would cut into his body. As for the gag, it was so tight that he was having trouble breathing. But where had the girl learned of such knots? No, she wasn't a girl, he had to keep reminding himself. Eva was the enemy. Eva was Xana. She was seated on the floor beside Odd, with her laptop on her knees. She was analyzing a series of images and files, the video of Elida's mother, some photos of Professor Hertz and scientific articles. From time to time, to distract herself a little, she would open a series of images that seemed to come from a video game. In them was a sci-fi-like city that seemed somewhat oriental. There were azure roofs in the form of pagodas and transparent, colored pathways intertwined around towers. Eva looked inside, but when Odd tried to ask her a question about the gag, she ignored him completely. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Eva put the computer down and got up. She said to Odd, don't make a sound. If not, I'll be forced to hurt the person that has just disturbed us. And I'm sure that will displease you. When she responded to the intercom, her voice immediately changed, it was now that of a mature man. Yes. Hello, the intercom crackled. I'm Ulrich, a classmate of Eva's. I'm here with other friends. Is Eva there, please? When he heard his friend's voice, Odd twitched. He had to slide across the floor, reach the door and warn them. Eva responded in the man's voice, no, I'm sorry. My daughter went out with a friend. A boy named Odd. Ah, okay, but it's just, well, excuse me, children, the masculine voice continued. I'm very busy. She hung up and turned to Odd, smiling. She started using her normal voice again. You see? Nobody was hurt. You were perfect. Eva went to the window to see if the others were leaving the house, then she approached Odd. Her self-assurance was terrifying. She skillfully removed the gag that was preventing the boy from speaking. My friends, you're not happy, she sneered. I let them go without hurting them. I have the impression that you wanted to tell me something. What? Can I have water? Odd asked. This thing was choking me. Eva laughed heartily, and in her laugh, the girl's voice mingled with a deeper and more twisted one belonging to the being within her. Water, she said. You just have to go find it, my boy. Wasn't it you and your friends who said that Xana was defeated? It was a nightmare. Odd knew Xana. He had fought him many times and he had seen someone possessed by the artificial intelligence that lived in Lyoko. But this was different. Eva seemed like a normal girl, in both voice and expressions. And then, when William Dunbar was possessed by Xana, the eye, his sign, occasionally appeared in his pupils. Eva had no sign. Not to mention, the monster no longer lived in Lyoko. Lyoko was currently deactivated. Had he evolved? And how was it possible that each of them didn't notice anything? What are you going to do? Odd asked. Good question. Destroy you, of course. X.A.N.A.'s voice responded coldly. And then, destroy every being that gets in my way, but, why? Eva didn't seem to be herself anymore. Her voice was metallic and her face expressionless. Because you humans, you're wrong, and now, you're going to pay for your mistakes. You think you're superior, the kings of the world, but you'll soon discover that that's not the case. I've already prepared an infallible plan. Eva returned to her laptop and pressed several keys until a photo appeared. It was that of a man whose face was half hidden by a hat. And his open mouth highlighted horrible canine teeth made of gold. I'll use of this man, who you probably don't even know yet. Xana said. Then I'll use this girl, Eva. Then, the creature looked at Odd, who, for the first time, felt completely horrified. And then I'll use you, Odd Della Rabbia. You'll be of precious use to me. Before the student could do anything to stop her, Eva leaned forward and took his face between her hands. Her fingers were icy, like death. Then, the girl's face approached Odd's, closing the gap between them little by little, lips parted. Please, he whispered. They kissed. An intense smoke then exited Eva's lips and entered Odd's. Then, everything became obscure for him. And everything changed. Eva stood and quickly united the ropes restraining the boy. I'm ready, Odd announced in a bizarre and trembling voice. Then, he started laughing in the same metallic voice as X.A.N.A.'s. Controlling this boy was much easier than the girl, because he has a rudimentary mind. Wow, great. I already feel more at ease in this boy's skin. So, it's time to go. Eva said with a wink. The other snotty brats must surely be wondering where we've gone. midday, at the Washington office. Dido had remained alone. That was exactly what she wanted. She had proposed to her secretary to take a few hours off for lunch with friends. This building was part of an office complex, but behind its grayish facade hid the best security technology on the market. However, Dido was convinced that the old methods were a lot more secure. She also continued to distrust her secretary, as although she trusted her a little, she could always listen in on and record her phone calls. Dido nervously lit a cigarette. She had so hoped that the Hopper affair would be closed for a long time, and archived in a file with the label authorized personnel only. It was a failure, certainly, but one that dated back more than 10 years. In the meantime, her life had advanced, as had her career. She no longer thought about the professor and his sophisticated computers. On the other hand, today, this old story bounced back with the force of an atomic bomb. Dido always had 3 keys in her office. She kept them in 3 different spots in the room to open the secret drawer in her desk. From it, she took out an old diary filled with code. She turned the computer on and entered its repertoire. Then, she typed a series of passwords composed of numbers and letters. As soon as she did this, the computer displayed the telephone number she needed. Finally, before dialing it, Dido activated all the anti-intercept protections she had. The speaker responded on the 3rd ring. Their voice seemed deformed by some device, but it mattered little as Dido's voice was also as distorted. "Madam, it's been a long time. The line is secure, I imagine." "Of course, Hannibal." Dido closed her eyes. As she did so, the image of the man she was talking to returned to her. He had the shifty eyes of a lizard, a large mouth and gold canine teeth. His hands were swollen and covered with rings. Hannibal had always had a taste for jewelry and flashy things. Dido remembered, even though they had only met but 3 times. But that was more than enough, because this man made her nauseous. "To what do I owe this call?" the man said. "And this honor?" "The network in France is operational again," responded Dido. "And we've just discovered that one of your men is there. Judging by his modus operandi, I suppose that it's Grigory Nictopoulos." "I think this information is accurate," sneered the man with golden teeth. "You haven't changed," she replied in a dry tone. "When there's a dirty job to do, you always send that man and his horrible dogs. So, I want to know why he's in Kadic City. What is hidden there, Hannibal? What exactly do you have in mind?" The man paused, then continued, "What you told us 6 years ago did not please us, Dido. The factory and Lyoko were ours, and their construction was commissioned by the Green Phoenix. And you pushed Walter to stop everything. But the moment came to count our losses. A new game has started and the cards are in our hands. And they're very good cards, too." "You're talking about Anthea Schaffer, I suppose?" Dido asked. "We know that she's in your hands." "Hey now. You'd better not be hoping that I'm going to tell you about that." Hannibal sneered. "It's a little early in the stages of negotiation." The woman was silent. Hannibal was an old fox. She knew that it was useless to try and make him fall into such a simple trap. He was called the magician for a reason. This cultureless man, the son of very poor farmers, had actually managed to become head of one of the oldest mafia organizations. Dido could not underestimate her adversary, a true rattlesnake. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "The Green Phoenix wants to participate in the operation, and make a profit out of it," the magician replied. "So, here is my proposition. We let you bury this story once and for all, and in exchange, you allow us to look at the plans of the old abandoned computer in the factory." "In your DRAMS, Dido was about to respond, but she didn't have time. Hannibal had already hung up.
Looks like things are getting tense for the Lyoko Warriors. It seems odd is under Xana's control now. Will our heroes dive into Lyoko again? And what is the government hunting our heroes? And what will happen next? Subscribe and hit the bell to stay tuned to the next episode. And I'll talk to you all later.